Have you ever walked away from a conversation with a knot in your throat, even after saying everything you thought you needed to say? Have you ever felt that strange emptiness inside, as if your words had vanished into the air, leaving you weaker, rather than stronger? Perhaps you were surrounded by voices louder than yours, voices that interrupt, that mock, that dominate the room with a confidence that feels less like truth and more like arrogance. And in that moment, you wondered, did my silence make me a coward? Did I just surrender by holding my tongue? We are taught from childhood that every truth must be defended. Every attack must be answered, and every disagreement must be fought as if silence were defeat. We are told that strength lies in speech, in winning arguments, in outshining the other. But what if this belief is a lie? What if everything you have been conditioned to think about silence is the greatest deception of all? Consider this true. Power has never been in words, but in their absence. The world belongs not to those who shout the loudest, but to those who no longer need to shout at all. Nietzsche once said that he who fights with monsters should see to it that he does not himself become a monster. And perhaps the greatest monster we fight daily is our own ego, the fragile voice within us that cannot bear to be questioned, panics when misunderstood, that insists on being heard, even when nothing needs to be said. But what if victory does not belong to the one who defends or convinces or reacts? What if victory belongs to the one who can remain still, silent, untouched, while the storm of noise swirls around him? Silence unsettles. Silence destabilizes. Silence is not weakness. It is presence. And today, you will see silence not as an escape, but as the most devastating form of response you can ever wield. The truth is uncomfortable, most of the time. Your silence is not power. It is resignation. It is the silence of someone who has been tamed, who has learned to swallow their rage and call it maturity. You convince yourself that avoiding conflict is wisdom, that keeping the peace is strength, that letting others speak over you is noble. But deep down, you know the price you are paying. Think of how often this happens. At work, you watch as others dominate meetings with shallow confidence, while your deeper ideas are ignored. In relationships, you bite your tongue to avoid confrontation, even when every fiber of your being knows you should set a boundary. With friends, with family, with strangers, you choose the comfort of silence not because it empowers you, but because you fear the weight of your own voice. And in this way, your silence becomes the very weapon used against you. Others learn that you will not resist, that you will not fight back, that they can impose their will upon you without consequence. Your calmness is mistaken for weakness, and slowly, piece by piece, your presence in the world begins to shrink. This is not the silence of strength. This is the silence of submission. The silence of the herd, of those who live by the expectations of others, of those who measure their worth by how little disturbance they cause. Nietzsche called this the morality of slaves, a code of obedience disguised as virtue, teaching you to endure what should not be endured, to lower your head and call it goodness. And here lies the tragedy. You believe you are preserving peace, but in truth, you are betraying yourself. The more you submit, the more others take. The more you avoid conflict, the more conflict you create within yourself. The world does not reward quiet submission. It feeds on it. It grows stronger from your restraint, while you grow weaker from your silence. Every unspoken word leaves a mark. Every moment you hold back your truth builds a prison around you, until one day you realize that the walls are not outside, but inside you have become your own jailer. Ask yourself, how much of your life is being stolen in the name of false harmony? How many times have you lost the chance to define who you were? Or because you chose to remain invisible? This is the problem. Not that you are silent, but that your silence has been colonized. You no longer wield it, it wields you. Carl Jung once wrote, "What you resist persists. What you deny submits you. What you accept transforms you." Behind these words lies the secret of silence. If you remain quiet out of fear, you are denying yourself. You are submitting to the will of others. But when your silence comes from presence from mastery it becomes the very force that transforms not only you, but the space around you. Nietzsche saw the same truth from another angle. He warned that the majority argued not to uncover truth, but to protect their fragile illusions. He observed that the surest way to corrupt a youth is to instruct him to hold in higher esteem those who think alike than those who think differently. What does this mean? That when you argue for acceptance, when you fight to prove your point, you have already surrendered to the herd morality, the desperate need to belong. Freud would call it the tyranny of the ego. Ego cannot tolerate being ignored, misunderstood, or contradicted. It rushes to defend itself, to explain, to convince. But in doing so, it exposes its weakness. Every defense is a confession of insecurity. Every argument is proof that you need the other to validate your existence. In Schopenhauer. Ever the pessimist saw human interaction as a theater of vanity. To him, silence was a rare form of wisdom because it stripped away the mask. He wrote that the wise man always holds in reserve more than he says. The more words you expend, the more you reveal your weaknesses. Across all these thinkers, Jung, Nietzsche, Freud, Schopenhauer, pattern emerges. The true battle is not with the other, but within. It is the battle against your compulsion to react, to prove, to defend. Silence is not merely the absence of speech. It is a discipline. It's an art of holding back the ego's cry for recognition. And it is only when silence becomes intentional, when it is no longer the refuge of fear, but the language of power, that it transforms from submission into strength. Silence is not emptiness. Silence is a mirror, and what a mirror reveals can be unbearable. When you remain silent in the middle of a confrontation, the other person suddenly faces something they are not prepared for, themselves. Without your words to push against, they are left with their own. Without your reaction to absorb their anger, they are confronted by the raw echo of their own insecurity. Modern psychology shows that in moments of conflict, silence is almost always interpreted as judgment. It does not matter if you are simply listening. The human brain fills the void with paranoia. The amygdala, the center of fear and anxiety, lights up. The person begins to ask themselves, what is he thinking? Did she see through my bluff? Does he know I'm lying? Is she laughing at me inside? This is the invisible power of silence. It does not strike with volume, but with absence. It destabilizes not because it acts, but because it refuses to. Like an unyielding wall, it forces the other person to exhaust themselves against something that does not move. Think of a predator in the wild. The most dangerous animal is not the one that growls, but the one that waits in stillness. The hunter who observes without moving creates more terror than the one who charges blindly. Silence works the same way. It does not expose you, it exposes them. And yet, most people cannot bear this kind of silence. They rush to fill it. They talk more, reveal more, contradict themselves more. The louder they become, the more fragile they appear. Your silence becomes the scalpel that cuts away their disguise, exposing the trembling core beneath. But let us be honest, silence is not only difficult for others, it is difficult for you, because everything in you wants to react. The ego screams to defend itself, to explain, to justify. To sit in silence while someone mocks you or misunderstands you feels like swallowing fire. Your pride burns, your chest tightens, you want to explode. This is why silence is power, because it is not passive. It is an act of brutal self-mastery. It is the art of killing the impulse to defend what does not need defense. It is the refusal to let the ego drag you into a battlefield that was never yours to begin with. Imagine a chess game. Every word you speak is a move revealed. Every emotional reaction is a piece sacrificed. The one who speaks without discipline shows his entire strategy. The one who stays silent hides his empire. Jung would say that silence confronts us with our own shadow. Because when you stop reacting, you are forced to ask, why do I need to be understood so badly? Why does rejection hurt me so much? Why do I fear being invisible? Silence strips away the illusion of strength and forces us to face our hidden weakness, and this is why it is so devastating against manipulators. People who thrive on emotional control depend on your reaction. They need your anger, your fear, your words to maintain their dominance. Without your response, the cycle collapses. They lose. Their grip, their mask slips, their weakness surfaces. This is the transformation, from silence as escape to silence as presence, from silence as fear to silence as mastery, from silence as weakness to silence as strength. The world does not need more people shouting to be heard. It needs those whose silence speaks louder than any word. Silence is not absence. It is not emptiness. It is not a void between words. True silence is presence. It is mastery. It is the stillness of someone who no longer needs to fight for recognition, because their very being radiates authority. Jung believed that individuation, the process of becoming whole, demands that we face our shadow. Silence is the shadow's voice. To sit quietly in the face of ridicule, to refuse to defend yourself against misunderstanding, is to confront the parts of you that crave validation. It is painful. It feels like death. But it is the death of dependence, the death of weakness, the death of the false self. Nietzsche called for the Bermensch. It's the one who creates his own values instead of inheriting the morality of the herd. This figure does not shout, does not argue, does not beg to be understood. He remains silent not because he is weak, but because he no longer needs the approval of the crowd. His silence is not the silence of submission, it is the silence of sovereignty. And this is where the truth becomes frightening. Because to live this way, you must accept loneliness, must accept being misunderstood, rejected, even hated. But here's the paradox. Once you embrace this solitude, you are never truly alone again, because you have yourself. You have mastery. You have the power no one can take, the ability to remain unshaken in the face of chaos. So look at your life. How many times has your silence betrayed you? And how many times will you allow it to betray you again? The time has come to change its meaning. From this moment on, let your silence no longer be submission. Let it be presence. Let it be mastery. Because he who masters silence masters himself. And he who masters himself has already won every battle. But silence does something deeper still. It triggers unresolved wounds in the other. Abandonment, rejection, humiliation. To be met with silence is to feel erased. It is to realize that your presence is not as powerful as you thought. For the narcissist, for the manipulator, this is intolerable. And so they rage, they panic, they unravel, while you remain still, untouchable. This is the paradox of silence. It feels like doing nothing, but it is in fact the most active force in the room. It shapes the battlefield without lifting a finger. It bends others without moving. It is the gravity that pulls everything toward you. And when you learn to wield it, you discover something shocking. You no longer need to win arguments. You no longer need to defend your truth, because truth does not require defense. Presence alone is enough. Now ask yourself with brutal honesty, how many times has your silence been nothing more than fear disguised as wisdom?
How many times?
You bitten your tongue not because you were in control, but because you were afraid of being judged, abandoned, or rejected. Think back to the last argument you avoided. Did you remain silent because you had transcended the need to convince or because you were terrified of conflict? Did you walk away calm and centered? Or did you walk away with a storm inside, replaying all the words you wished you had said? Be honest. How often has your silence made you invisible? How often has it allowed others to take what was yours, your credit, your space, your dignity, while you convinced yourself that keeping the peace was the right choice? And here is the question that cuts the deepest. If your silence is supposed to protect you, why do you feel weaker every time you use it? Jung believed that the first step toward transformation is confrontation not with the world, but with yourself. And perhaps it is time you confront the uncomfortable truth. Your silence has not always been power. Many times it has been submission. Many times it has been the betrayal of your own voice. So ask yourself, is my silence the weapon of the strong nor the cage of the weak? If silence can destroy you when it is born from fear, it can also transform you when it is born from strength. The task is not to abandon silence, but to reclaim it. to purify it from submission and forge it into a weapon of presence. The first step is conscious restraint. Learn to resist the reflex to answer immediately. Every time you feel the urge to explain yourself, to defend yourself, to justify your existence, pause. That pause is not emptiness. It is power. It tells the other that you are not playing their game, that you are not bound by their rhythm. The longer you resist the impulse, the more control you gain not over them, but over yourself. The second step is active observation. While others speak to fill the void, you listen like a hunter listens to the forest. You catch what they miss. The tremor in their voice, the contradiction in their story, the insecurity behind their arrogance. You collect these fragments in silence. And when, if you choose to respond, your words will not be many. They will be sharp, precise, impossible to ignore. The third step is the mastery of time. Most people collapse under silence because they cannot bear tension. They rush to speak, to break the unbearable stillness. But when you learn to let silence linger, to let it stretch like a drawn bow, the power shifts. Each second becomes heavier for them, lighter for you. The silence itself becomes your voice. The fourth step is unpredictability. When you master silence, you become unreadable. Others cannot anticipate whether you will respond, or when, or how. And unpredictability is always feared. It forces others to measure every word, to tread carefully, to reveal more of themselves than they intended. You become the gravitational center of the interaction. They orbit around you, not the other way around. This is not passivity. It's a strategy. Machiavelli taught that men are governed more by fear than by love. And silence, when intentional, creates a fear deeper than any raised voice ever could. It unsettles because it cannot be manipulated. It resists the weapons of guilt, shame, intimidation. Schopenhauer advised that the wise reveal less than they know, speak less than they think, and choose carefully when to break silence. For him, silence was not emptiness, but economy, the deliberate withholding of energy. Words and vulnerability. And Jung, more than anyone, would say this. Silence is not about the other. It is about you. To wield silence is to step closer to individuation, the process of becoming whole, of no longer depending on the eyes or ears of others to define who you are. When your silence is grounded in self-knowledge, it no longer betrays you. It protects you. It no longer cages you. It frees you.